Canada is furious, and it is showing that it is the front lines quite literally and symbolically to the rest of the world in the potential war that United States wants to bring on to the Western Hemisphere, and that Canada is not going to back down, that Canada is the new leader of the free world, and that Canada is going to make all of the alliances necessary as a bulwark to stop the United States and Donald Trump regime's imperial ambitions. Just take a look at what's happened over the past 24 to 48 hours. Donald Trump threatens Greenland, which is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Prime Minister of Carney within hours, standing side by side with Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark. Prime Minister Carney putting out the following message: Canada and Denmark are allies and partners in our shared responsibility for the security and resilience of the Arctic. As I reaffirm to Prime Minister Frederiksen today, Canada will always support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Denmark, including Greenland. Together, we'll keep working to secure peace in Ukraine and across Europe. And with respect to the across Europe part, think about it like this: Donald Trump attacks Ukraine. Donald Trump goes after Zelensky. Donald Trump is trying to set Zelensky up for these meetings in Mar-a-Lago or wherever, where he seeks to extort and extract the sovereignty of Ukraine in favor of Putin. What does Prime Minister Carney do? He immediately meets, before Donald Trump meets with Zelensky, Prime Minister Carney meets with Zelensky, gives him the appropriate state welcome, shows respect to Zelensky, and makes it very clear that Canada will always be on the side of Ukraine. And we've seen at these pivotal points where Donald Trump has ratcheted up the threats at the sovereignty of Ukraine, Prime Minister Carney has always either met with Zelensky right before or right after those threats by Donald Trump, making it clear that Canada will always be an ally of Ukraine. And then think about it this way. Donald Trump goes, remember Donald Trump did that Asia tour where Trump humiliated himself and then made all those ridiculous comments when he was in South Korea and visiting Asia in general. He was in Malaysia and he was just making a fool of himself. Remember, Prime Minister Carney shows up and presents himself as a partner and ally of the entire world. I'll just show this with you as well. Just take a look at the difference between how the Trump regime handles things, with Stephen Miller and Lindsey Graham foaming at the mouth about war with Greenland, and Denmark doesn't know what it's doing, and Denmark better hand us over Greenland or else. And the statement coming out from the White House, Caroline Levin on Tuesday: the United States reserves all rights, including invading Greenland and using military force. Well, on the same day, Prime Minister Carney was right next to Mette Frederiksen, and here's the exchange between the Prime Minister of Canada and the Prime Minister of Denmark. Mutual respect, mutual cooperation, respect for sovereignty, respect for the UN Charter. Here, let's play this clip right here.
The future of Greenland and Denmark decided solely by the people of Denmark. In Greenland, we know that. It's why we cooperate. As I said at the start, and I'll finish here, why we cooperate culturally, why we cooperate economically, and why we cooperate in security.
I don't have a lot to add. I totally agree with you. We are very close allies and friends. I would like to thank you for your work within the Coalition of the Willing, your support to European security. We work very closely together in the Baltic states as well, and you have been very clear in your statement when it comes to the respect of national sovereignty and the respect of our common values, the only values where you can build a global world society on. So I really appreciate your strong support. I think we are both very into securing the Arctic region, and together with other NATO allies, we can secure the region. So hopefully everybody is willing to work together, and I think you are very good friend, a very close ally to not only Denmark but Europe. So
Very good. Thank you very much.
we ask for it.
Hunter?
There we go.
Thank you.
Now, you know I gotta go bring in Meidas Canada head Charlie Angus, by the way, whose Meidas Canada Resistance tour may be in a city or town near you soon if you live in Canada. So check out the schedule did I anoint Angus to Prime Minister, former Member of Parliament and leader of Meidas Canada, Charlie Angus. Check out his tour when he's in your city or town in Canada. But here's Charlie Angus talking about how Canadians view Donald Trump now, that this is part of a global gangster fascism. Trump and Putin, global gangster fascism. So this first part of the conversation I have with Charlie Angus, by the way, subscribe to his channel on Meidas Canada, subscribe to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel, help us get to 6 million subscribers. But here Charlie Angus says, gangster fascism is what Trump represents. More than just, Republican this. No, gangster fascism. And then in the second part of my discussion with Charlie Angus, he says, here's how Canada is standing up on the front lines against the gangster fascism. So here's first what Charlie Angus says about gangster fascism. Play this clip.
Okay, let's talk about what Donald Trump has set out to do by invading Venezuela and kidnapping President Maduro and his wife. This has nothing to do with democracy. Trump has made it clear that the Democratic opposition he considers weak. He's not even going to consider letting them take control in their own country. It's about the oil, he said. This has nothing to do with drugs, obviously, even though drugs and drug threats were the original reason for him shooting people off boats and then seizing the oil tankers, because he just recently pardoned the ex-head of Honduras, Hernandez, who is charged and convicted of flooding the United States with cocaine. So what was the point? The point was to send a message. To send a message to Canada and to the rest of the world that what the United States is and has become is a gangster klepto state that will do what they want to do and shake down whoever they want to shake down. Gangster fascism. What he said at this press conference he gave was that American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. This was sending a message. And it's a clear message to Canada. He said, we will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. This operation should serve as a warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty. Well, clearly, Venezuela wasn't threatening American sovereignty. Venezuela was doing its own thing when Donald Trump, again, launched attacks on the fishing boats and set up the illegal blockade and seized the ships. Donald Trump is telling us that the oil that he is interested in getting control of is somehow part of the sovereignty of America. What he said was this was the Don Roe doctrine, an update on the 19th century Manifest Destiny Monroe doctrine, but it has nothing to do with the 19th century Manifest Destiny. This is classic gangster shakedowns. Donald Trump is a gangster. We have to be really clear about that. It's something that the American media has tiptoed around and ignored time and time again. Donald Trump exists today because of the massive amount of dark Russian mob money that was laundered through his operations. It created this image of him as this wealthy tycoon. He has benefited from mafia money. He has benefited from criminal ties. That's who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is a convicted sexual predator. We know this, and yet he was allowed to become president of the United States of America. So should we be surprised that MAGA, with its constant grift and constant threat and constant shakedown, is basically a criminal state run by a criminal? So that's the first part of what we talk about in criminal fascism. Ben Meiselas from MeidasTouch said that one of the reasons he started to work with me was that I was the first person publicly to identify the nature of modern MAGA as a gangster fascist state. I don't know if I was the first, but it was really important from the beginning of my work to try and make people understand what we were dealing with wasn't just a new manifestation of crazy Republican politics and right-wing chest beating, that it was something different. It was the gangster element, the kleptocracy, but also the rising level of authoritarianism, undermining the rule of law, threatening judges, going after independent media, the fascist element.
And then here, Charlie Angus discusses with me about Canada being on the front lines of a possible invasion by the United States. Here, play this clip.
Once you put the gangster fascist pieces together, you now know the level of threat that's on our border. And long before Donald Trump even knew where Venezuela was, he was setting a narrative of threat against Canada. So Donald Trump talks about securing the borders and stopping the terrorists and going after the drug kings. Well, the first thing he said about Canada was that we were somehow this fentanyl center killing thousands of Americans. He described fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. Well, you know the coded language of weapons of mass destruction, giving a U.S. regime the ability to go in and invade in another country. And Prime Minister Trudeau tried and tried again to reassure the Americans, to use facts, to show that our border was not flooding the Americans with fentanyl, but it didn't matter. It was about establishing a narrative. Kash Patel of the FBI then ramped it up. He started to talk about needing to protect the American border from the Canadian terrorist threat. He talked about hundreds of terrorists coming across the border. It was ridiculous. We know that. But did you hear the New York Times and the Washington Post and the CNN and the blah blahs on the evening talk show saying, what the heck is he talking about, this threat from Canada? Donald Trump was establishing a narrative of threat. And then that threat was elevated again by Kristi Noem, who started to talk about the threat of the northern border, that's us, bringing criminal gangs, El Salvadorian gangs across the border to terrorize poor American citizens. We knew that was ridiculous. But again, the narrative of threat, and now Donald Trump is telling the world that he can go wherever he wants, he can take whatever he feels he wants to take from any country under the pretext of threat. A threat that in Venezuela did not exist, a threat that in Canada does not exist. This is the nature of gangster fascism. But I talked about the crack that's beginning to appear, and I want to go into that a bit more. Because the crack is appearing in the bombast, the arrogance, and the hubris that we saw in that press conference. Because Donald Trump, as a gangster, only understands shakedown. He doesn't believe that America wins by negotiations. It's only by threat. And what he's abandoned is America's long history of using their immense diplomatic power to get what they want. What do I mean by that? Well, Canada would have bent over backwards in the past to avoid an open confrontation with the United States. So the language would have been coded. It would have been diplomatic. We would have done a dance. And then in the end, we would compromise. Donald Trump has taken that ability to compromise away from us because he's ridiculed us. He's undermined us. He's laughed at us. He thought he could slap us around. But what did that accomplish, Donald? You see this incredible resistance and determination now from the Canadian people. They hate your guts. And Canadians will never, ever, ever allow you to take anything from us. We would never give up our freedom under any circumstances. Donald Trump, you have made us aware of the necessity to resist. And by his ridiculing of the notion that he went into Venezuela to restore democracy, because obviously Donald Trump doesn't care about democracy, he's pulled out from the Western allies any ability to paper over the problems, to pretend that there's a way we can talk about this. He's made it clear this is just a shakedown. And following the attack in Venezuela, Stephen Miller's wife posted a picture of Greenland with the American flag all over it and said, soon. So he was sending a message to Europe. Guess what? I'm coming for you next. I'm coming for a NATO ally. He's forcing the Europeans as well. They would have bent themselves into pretzels to avoid a confrontation with the United States. Well, now they have no choice. You either stand up or you roll over. That is what the world of gangster politics is all about. What I'm betting on is that this hubris and this arrogance is the beginning of the end. I'm not saying it's coming soon. But America is weaker than it's ever been. It has no allies. It's alienated Africa, which is going much more to the Russians and the Chinese. He's completely angered and alienated Latin America and thinks he can push them around. They are going to be standing up. He's sending a message to China. Well, if we can shake down countries, well, so can you. So, well, there goes our ally in Taiwan. He's sending a message to Putin, do what you want. But what he's telling the rest of the world is either we stand together at this time or we're going to be broken. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is the moment where it's no longer possible for those sitting on the sidelines, for those in the middle of the road, for those hemming and hawing and hoping for the best, to realize this is anything but a gangster fascist threat. And it's up to us as Canadians to resist. And I know we will. You know, Canada has a long history of defending the international rule of law. Now we're dealing with a regime that openly murders people on the sea and invades countries and kidnaps their leaders. All bets are off. But we know what the mission is and we know what we have to do. And I want to close on this. I want to quote Winston Churchill in 1941 in the darkest moments of the Second World War and what he said about Canada. He said, Canada is the linchpin. I'm really struck by that. Canada is a linchpin of the English-speaking world. Canada, whose relations of friendly, affectionate intimacy with the United States on the one hand, and her unswerving fidelity to the Commonwealth on the other, is the link which joins together the great branches of the human family, a link which, spanning the oceans, brings the continents into their true relation and will prevent in future generations any growth of division between the proud and the happy nations of Europe and the great countries which have come into existence in the New World. And here we are as that threat is here to break us apart. Canada remains the linchpin. We remain the front lines. We remain the voice of resistance. This isn't going to be easy, my friends, but I want to assure you, if we keep doing what we're doing, and I urge Prime Minister Carney to start moving on this volunteer force of civilians, we need to build that up. We need to continue to build our alliances. We know now that the Europeans understand that they're going to work with Canada because we are that linchpin that's holding it together, and we will not break. Not now, not ever. Because we are true, nor strong and free, and we'll always be true, nor strong and free. So thank you so much. Folks, January 16th in Edmonton, we've got some details on that. This is going to be at the Bison Lodge, the Old Times Cabin at the Nellie McClung Park. This is going to be a bit of a different thing because trying to organize two Meidas town halls was pretty difficult on such short notice, but we really felt it important to be in Alberta at this time. So in Edmonton, I'm going to be doing it with my colleague, for the MP for Edmonton Strathcona, Heather McPherson. So I'll be appearing with her. She is going to be organizing it with her team, and it's going to be her event, but I will be there, and we're inviting the Mighty Meidas out to support and to hear the latest in the fight of resistance. January 17th, be in Calgary, still waiting. I mean, we're just getting the last details, but we'll get information to you. So January 16th, Edmonton, Bison Lodge, Nellie McClung Park. January 17th, we'll be in Calgary. We'll get you that information soon. Keep kicking at the darkness, my friends. It will bleed daylight. Thank you. Merci. And make which.
Well, there you have it, folks. Let me know what you think and hit subscribe. Help us get to 6 million subscribers. And thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.